Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Education Subcommittee. We'll get started where we left off last week, which was on House Bill 1376, the virtual education proposed legislation. Alistair, we'll start from Bill page 9 and go on from there. I encourage everyone we're going to go section by section as we did last week to bring up any concerns or any questions you may have as we go through each section. And we'll go back through the bill. There were some amendments proposed to us and some comments sent to us too from either members of the committee or folks who have other bills in this area. And we'll take those up at the appropriate time when we go back through the legislation again. So with that said, and just a quick notification for everybody in the public, we will stop at about 12:45. Today, but we'll go through as much as we can right now. So I just encourage, we'll get a lot of, try to get in as many questions as you can. We aren't moving this bill today, by the way, again. This bill, we are not in a rush to move this bill, although it's after crossover, but we still have time to work on it. All right, so cool. Thanks, everybody. Alice, you want to get started on Bill page 9?
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I'm just going to back up a little bit and just cover what we started to cover last time, which is in the case at the bottom of page 8 and going into page 9, when there is an emergency event declared and a school is temporarily made into a virtual school, a plan has to be put in place. That involves a method to accurately measure attendance, attention paid throughout all aspects of education to ensure that there's equity among all schools, method to measure learning loss, instructional procedures designed to guarantee student engagement during the tenure of virtual education, proper assignment for all school personnel, a plan for regular student check-ins, in accordance with the later section that we'll see, a plan for regular communications with parents, and a process to transition back from temporary virtual school to ordinary public school attendance. This plan needs to be submitted to the State Board of Education before the school can transition. The State Board has 10 days to accept the plan or return for modification, and the County Board has 5 days to meet the State Board's modifications. And then the plan will be published on the website. Any questions on that particular subsection? Okay, so then
there's a question, Alistair. Hold on.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, Delegate Blagojevich-Carr.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The one piece that when I was thinking through this section that I didn't see specifically called out was about access to technology for both students and for educators. I suppose that might be implied under C1I, attention paid throughout all aspects of the plan to student equity to ensure that they're receiving. But I guess I'd like to see something particularly called out on that front. We know that that was a challenge this past year in terms of students either not having access to a device or not having access to internet. And I feel like something a little more specific needs to be included in this part.
I think that's a good suggestion. There is page 9 stretches on for quite a while. So on the third part of page 9, there's a reference to providing some of that equipment, but I think it could be made part of the transition plan as well. Okay, so moving on to subsection D, the bottom of the first part of page 9. So this is starting to cover the application to form a virtual school. And as I was saying last time, but it might be worthy of review, under the current law, a county board or the State Department of Education can found a virtual school. I don't believe it's been used before, but that is the current law in the books. So if the General Assembly does not take legislative action to regulate that this year, that will remain the law in the books. If there's some appetite among you to limit the method by which county boards or the State Department of Education can form virtual schools, I think it might be worthy of taking up in this bill and discussing. So in the set of amendments we have before us, there is a
Just started. Perfect.
there is some modification to how that procedure would work. And that is what's going on here.
Alistair, what page are you on? I'm sorry, maybe I'm missing the page.
I'm sorry, I'm on the bottom of page 9, but I just wanted to give that as a bit of a preamble just to explain what's going on in the larger context of this bill.
Page 9, page 1.
The first page of page 9 going into the second page of page 9. Okay, so this is subsection D, if you see at the bottom of page 9, leading into what's labeled subsection F, but should be subsection E, I think. The county board is allowed to create a virtual school if the application includes attendance criteria listed under subsection G here, and if they follow the requirement of subsection F. So under subsection F, this is following language that the General Assembly has adopted for the charter school process. The county board will make an application. The State Board of Education will have 120 days to review it. The State Board will approve an application contingent on the ability of the county board to meet timelines established in their application procedure and ability to have suitable equipment and software necessary for the provision of virtual education. A virtual school established under this section must meet certain criteria. It must be at a minimum open to the average free and reduced price meals percentage of students that exist throughout the county. So for instance, if the average free and reduced price meals in a county, free and reduced price meals students in public schools in a county is 65% over the previous 3 years, not including 2020, 2021, then there have to be at least 65% of students accepted to the school that are free and reduced price meal student. Preference for remaining students includes students with disabilities, a student with limited English proficiency, homeless students, and students with siblings who are enrolled in the virtual school. If there are insufficient slots to accommodate those students, then the virtual school may be open to other schools, students in the county to enroll. But under the way that the current virtual school system structure exists, a county board could establish a virtual school which could take enrollment from anywhere in the state, and this is limiting it to enrollment within that county. Then there's a requirement after that. So sorry, I should pause and ask if there are questions on that part, I think.
Yeah, let me just open up this real quick for questions too. But let me just say this as we're going through right now, the state can develop its own virtual school if they wanted to under current law. Is that correct, Alistair?
Yes, that's correct.
And so under this, we're putting parameters on so that the county boards create them, and then we're creating parameters around how they would be created. There's a larger conversation too if we want to go down this road, or keep it as is, where counties the state can create their own school, or versus how a county can create their own school. So this language is developed based on how charter schools are developed. We wanted to add some language in here to place parameters around them, similar to how we do our current charter schools. So I just want to make that clear to everyone. Let me make it also clear that this is something that our work group, that the speaker developed over the summer months and did not speak to. We mostly spoke to only what kids are going through currently through virtual learning, not this part of it. So this is brand new and something that we're considering. Who is making that noise? Is that you, Eversole?
Yes, I'm a window open. Sorry.
So it's not something that we discussed during our time, but it is something that this committee can discuss moving forward. The floor is open for questions. Delegate Ebersol, then Delegate Rose, and then
Just two logistic ones, and I appreciate your comments about the state because that's actually in current language, and I think this bill we intend to strike that. So that's great. I think it's a very important part of this. When you say in this section, you start off talking about temporary virtual schools, but then you just switch to virtual. So is this whole section supposed to be about all virtual schools, or is it supposed to be about temporary virtual schools?
Can I do this one? So the language that came in, which is not language that I approved or that we wanted, which was permanent virtual schools. It now differentiates between temporary virtual schools, which is a state of when we are in a state of emergency, like we're currently in, and then there's virtual schools, which is that want to become virtual schools throughout, however long, right? Through what we're creating here. So there's temporary ones through states of emergency. Then there's I don't want to use the permanent, but sustained virtual schools.
So this section is about both then, because it just uses the term virtual schools. Because it moves, it starts off with temporary, but then you use the word virtual more generally. So I don't know if that's okay legally. I just want to point it out, that's all.
Go ahead, Alistair.
Virtual school is a defined term, which means a school established by the county board in accordance with this section. So
that could be a sustained one then in the stuff we're doing in this section.
Would be, yes, the term virtual schools means a sustained virtual school, if that's how you want to describe it.
Okay, because at the top, toward the beginning of it was virtual. Okay, you can work that out. Farms, I'm a little concerned about the farms because if we have community eligibility, we might have trouble with that number because community eligibility doesn't update its farms numbers. And are we just going to go with whatever the farms numbers were when a county entered community eligibility?
I think that's a good point, Delegate. I think we can use the same definition that was used for the concentration of poverty grants.
Yeah, right.
Okay.
Grant, yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yep, absolutely. Delegate Rose.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So if I'm following this right, I guess, can you just explain maybe a little bit, I'm a little confused. What flexibility will our locals have in implementing this? Because in my discussions with our superintendent a couple months ago, we were already looking into doing some virtual options moving forward, just from lessons learned that we've been through. Not necessarily a virtual school, but flexibility to take virtual classes within Carroll County. Are we going to have that kind of flexibility and not have to go through an onerous process that's very prescriptive, so that we, just say we have a couple smaller schools that can't offer, German or Latin because they don't have enough kids to do it. But if they could virtually bring in kids from other larger school, they could do it virtually as an option, and they're looking at that. So my biggest concern overall with doing any of this is creating an onerous process that takes away our local flexibility.
Go ahead, Alistair. You want to answer that?
Yeah, so I think that to establish a full-on virtual school, you have to go through this process, and you have to first be able to treat these specific populations. But if there are insufficient slots to enroll them, the school could be enrolling anyone. Additionally, we haven't gotten there yet, but there is a pilot program to do a virtual senior year, which could potentially address. So if those courses are offered as part of the virtual senior year, that could potentially allow a school to offer particular Latin or something of that nature, and that could be done that way.
Just as a follow-up then, my concern with just making it for a senior year, they've got 4 years and sometimes 8th grade to take the necessary requirements. And so this has always been my concern with the schedule. So they're going to have to pick and choose. So if they're restricted to only being able to do that virtually in their senior year, you're giving kids less flexibility to work in a virtual class if it works better for their overall schedule, depending on when they started maths and things of that nature, or even language in middle school or not. So I would just suggest more flexibility there at least.
We can talk about that pilot program once we get there, Delegate Rose. But
Okay.
Alistair, let me ask a question. Under the current law, could a school currently do that? Could a school currently offer French as a virtual class? If they wanted to, they wouldn't have to go through any parameters. Could they offer, financial literacy through a virtual class if they wanted to? Could that be done now?
I don't think current law speaks to it very well, so I think that is something that may be developed in the future. And I don't think that if it is, that this bill would limit it in the current form.
That's what I was thinking too, that I don't think, Delegate Rose, it does limit a school from having a virtual class offered in the current law, and it doesn't speak to it either, and neither does this bill. So it does provide some type of roadmap there, but maybe we'll get to the bottom of that. How about that? And figure that out.
Thank you.
I feel like Delegate Guyton has a comment to this section since she studied it in the past. Delegate, you have anything?
Not at the moment. I'm actually making notes about everything that's being said. We'll discuss later. Thank you.
All right, Delegate Polakovich-Carr.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would actually just, first of all, echo Delegate Rose's point. When she brought that up in the hearing, I really liked that idea. And I would say it's also my read that the bill doesn't limit it, but maybe there needs to be something that proactively says that, so it's not discouraging districts from that. The question that I had is, reading through this section about how enrollment is going to be decided for the virtual schools, I think it's, at least my reading of the bill is it's implied that students would be opting in and their families would be selecting to go to the schools. Is that the intention? Can we make that clear and expressly say that? Because I would hate to see where, because it isn't said one way or the other, that a district actually starts assigning students into a virtual school.
Fair enough. No, absolutely. That's a great point, Delegate
Thank you.
Polakovich-Carr. Always with the good points, man. Good stuff. Ever so sometimes. Delegate.
No, I go for volume and I'm bound to hit the target. 8 darts at it with one hand. So I think relevant to those questions, we may need to distinguish between virtual school where students are at home and virtual schooling where kids are in class. I have personal experience with the fact that there's a high-level calculus class at Howard County, never had enough students in any one school to offer the class, but it was taught at one class and those kids would go into a room and they would work there. We'd check in on them. So I think that's what we're saying, that's allowed. And so I'm really adding it just to let you know, but I think we might need to distinguish between virtual learning occurring in a school building versus the kind of virtual learning that would occur while students are not attending the building.
Correct. Yeah. Correct. Yeah, I think that's a great point. Man, look at you. Wow. Just out of nowhere. Yeah, we can do that. Alistair, you're good with that? Cool. All right. Delegate Hornberger.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And while we're on the topic of talking of the administration of the digital learning, I recently traveled to down south to Georgia, and there were some opportunities where we were working with folks that were still transitioning, interns and such. And one of the things that they brought up that's being used in other states is that there is currently software that utilizes the camera on the computer to look at the student. And if the student looks away, if the student does something where they're not completely focused on the screen, the computer captures that and then can ding them or take points away or have them restart the test. Where I'm going with this is the biometrics are very advanced right now, and they have the ability to watch the student because this is under the guise of they think they're cheating or if they're looking away, they're doing something else. But these things are very scary. And I don't know if there's a way that we can legislatively protect our students but the things that they can do now with these optical devices that are on the laptops is very troubling. I don't know if this is the right place of the bill to talk about this, but I found it to be very disturbing and intrusive. So something I can do some more research on that before we meet next.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Delegate. Thanks for sharing that. It sounds like a great bill, but I'm not sure if I'm pretty sure we're not using that technology now. It does sound scary. I mean, can you imagine us using that during public hearings?
No.
How many things we will get? I
Are
appreciate.
we going to get into the policy of virtual schools, or is just an overarching? Like, I'm still struggling with what this bill is goal.
Yeah, so we aren't getting into instructional work. We aren't getting into. We're not getting into the any of the instructional work, any of the curriculum or anything like that. It's mostly the framework of how a virtual school is built to offer the the services that are needed for students to be able to if it's a temporary virtual school, for them to be able to be engaged in the school, any resources families might need. I think that's the focus. I think what you're speaking of is technology, and we do speak of technology in a sense of like, how do we manage the work that the teachers and students do on the devices.
Okay.
We're not getting to where you're going, I don't think.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you.
Cool. Okay, Delegate Ebersole with another question in this section.
I am back. Thank you. So Delegate Hornberger's spot on here, because there's student engagement software out there. Many counties have opted not to make their students be on screen, and I'm wondering if, first of all, if they're allowed legally to require students to be on screen, or in case they're not legally allowed to require them to, can a parent or an emancipated minor sign away that right? In this case, if schools actually want to at least have the kids on screen, because I think if you're going to make it a full virtual school, you're going to have that sort of engagement. We're all not going to admit it, but we're familiar with being on a Zoom and not paying as good attention as we should.
So there is language, Delegate. If you scroll back up to the first part of page 9 of the reprint, the instructional procedures must be developed as part of the temporary learning. The transitional learning plan, that student engagement has to be part of that. And that includes active participation, verified presence during class, and when appropriate, activated student cameras. So it doesn't get too deeply into the weeds of that, but that is part of what is required in this initially adopted plan.
I think it's something that we can discuss if we want to go down that road or not.
Are there any FERPA laws around that?
Right. Correct. Yeah.
I think that
That was more rhetorical, because that's a hard one right now.
well, I think that
it's
okay for the school system to have cameras on students. I think that under the FERPA extension of whenever a school system contracts with external entities, that data is okay. I don't know that storing that data and publishing it on the internet would be okay. I think that's a separate question, but I'm not extreme expert on FERPA, so I'm not sure, but I don't think it's necessarily violative of that.
Okay. Any other questions? All right. It is 11:45. That's when I promised we would get off this call. It's 11:46 actually. So I want to thank you all for being here, and we will take up the next sections later. And then the next meeting will be a much longer meeting. Prepare yourselves for that. If not tomorrow, I know that Revenues has a meeting tomorrow. And then we'll take it up next week if we could. And then we'll have a much longer conversation, about 2-hour conversation on this. So I just keep that in mind as we move forward. It could be probably Tuesday. So if not tomorrow, then definitely Tuesday. Okay. And then I think at that time, we probably will take up a few other bills. If not Senate, then some more House bills too at that time. So with that said, thank you, everybody.